Roxanne Sterling parked her silver Lexus in the driveway of the Westchester mansion she and her husband had bought 5 years ago. It was a chilly October evening, a light drizzle turning the fallen leaves into a slippery carpet. She adjusted her pearl earrings, Ethan's 10th wedding anniversary gift to her, and allowed herself to smile. Today she'd brilliantly negotiated a deal with Emerson Corporation that would bring her law firm a multi-million-dollar contract. Taking out the electronic key, Roxanne took it to the lock in a familiar motion. The indicator light flashed red. She frowned and tried again. Same result. Strange, it had worked this morning. She took out her cell phone and dialed her husband's number. It was ringing, but no one was picking up. Roxanne rang the doorbell. The lights were on in the house. Ethan's Range Rover was in the driveway, but no one answered. She walked around the house, peering into the first-floor windows. Something had changed in the living room. There were unfamiliar cushions on the couch. The painting over the fireplace was different. There was a vase of orchids on the coffee table. Roxanne hated those flowers because of her allergies. The phone in her hand vibrated. Ethan had finally called back. Yes? Her voice sounded strained. Roxy. He was quiet for a moment. We need to break up. I'm filing for divorce. She leaned against the wall of the house, feeling the ground go from under her feet. What's going on, Ethan? Why can't I get home? I changed the locks. It's better for everyone. Your things. I'll send them wherever you say. Better for everyone? Or for you and the woman whose things I see in our living room? A heavy pause hung. Don't make this any harder than it is, a steely note appeared in his voice. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. The call cut off. Roxanne slowly lowered herself onto the steps of the back porch, ignoring the drizzling rain. Memories of the last year flashed through her mind, how Ethan had started coming back late, citing problems at the fitness club chain. The strange phone calls after which he'd come out to talk in the garden. The new perfume that appeared on his shirts. She'd noticed all this, but wrote it off as fatigue and work stress. How naive she'd been. Walking back to the car, Roxanne pulled out a briefcase with documents and a laptop from the back seat. Good thing she always had the most important things with her. She started the engine and turned on the heater. It was going to be a cold night. In the light of the street lamps, she looked at the front of their house, the house she and Ethan had put so much love and effort into. She remembered how they'd renovated it 3 years ago, and Ethan had insisted on replacing all the plumbing, even though she'd thought it was a waste. She remembered how they'd argued over the color of the bedroom walls, and he'd finally agreed to her version. She remembered Sunday breakfasts on the veranda and evenings by the fireplace. Roxanne opened the glove compartment and pulled out a stack of papers: house insurance, bank statements, purchase agreement. Looking through the papers, she began to notice the first warning signs. 3 months ago, Ethan had amended the title to the property, adding some new clauses. 2 months ago, there had been large debits from their joint account. A week ago, he'd taken all the business documents out of the safety deposit box. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. He'd been preparing, methodically and carefully, prepared to throw her out of the life they'd built together for 20 years. The phone vibrated again, this time a message from Catherine, her best friend. Roxy, are you okay? I heard some strange rumors. Roxanne set the phone aside without answering. She stared up at the darkened windows of the second floor where her husband was now sleeping, perhaps more than one. A plan began to form in her head. Ethan obviously thinks she'll suck it up and quietly leave. He'd forgotten who he was dealing with. Forgot she wasn't the type to give up without a fight. She pulled out her laptop and opened up her firm's database. It was time to make inquiries about the new woman in their home. And then she would teach them both a lesson they would never forget. One thing Roxanne had learned in 20 years of practicing corporate law was that there was always a way to win. You just had to find your opponent's weakness. And she would. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof of the car. Roxanne took a sip of her cooled coffee and began typing. It was going to be a long night, but it was just the beginning. "Welcome to the Four Seasons, Mrs. Sterling." The receptionist handed her an electronic key with a flawless smile. Roxanne looked around the luxurious hotel lobby. Crystal chandeliers, marble columns, fresh flowers in antique vases. She and Ethan had once honeymooned here. Now she returned alone, with a travel bag hastily packed from the things she'd stored in the car. The presidential suite greeted her with perfect silence and a view of Manhattan at night. Roxanne kicked off her stiletto heels and poured herself a whiskey from the minibar. The first sip burned her throat. She walked to the panoramic window. The lights of skyscrapers blurred in the rainy gloom. The phone vibrated again. Catherine hadn't given up trying to get in touch. This time, Roxanne answered. "Oh my God, finally, I'm freaking out. Where are you?" "At the Four Seasons. Figured I deserved a little comfort after everything." "Roxy," her friend's voice trembled. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner." Roxanne sank into a chair, clutching her glass. "So you knew?" There were rumors. Everyone at the club was whispering about the new yoga instructor. Young, ambitious. They say she's risen from trainer to manager in no time. "What's her name?" Meredith Holbrook. She showed up about 6 months ago." Roxanne opened her laptop and typed the name into a search engine. A picture from the fitness club's website popped up on the screen. A young woman with a perfect figure and a professional smile. "Tell me everything you know." "She's in her early 30s. Says she studied in California. Charmed everyone at the club, staff and customers alike. Especially the men." Catherine paused. "With Ethan, they started spending a lot of time together. Meetings, discussing development strategy. At first, no one paid much attention. But then what? They were seen together in restaurants, at private parties. She wears expensive jewelry she couldn't afford on a manager's salary." Roxanne opened the gallery on her phone. The last picture of her and Ethan together was taken 4 months ago, a charity event, both of them smiling at the camera. His arm around her waist, but she could see it now. Her husband's gaze was detached, as if he was thinking somewhere far away. Or with someone else. "When was the last time you were in the club's main office?" Catherine asked. "About 3 months ago. Ethan said he'd hired a new lawyer for the current cases." "I can see why now. He didn't want you to cross paths with her." Roxanne flipped through the photos further. A corporate party 6 months ago. She spotted a slender blonde in the background watching Ethan closely. The opening of a new club. Same woman, now closer to the center of the group. History was unfolding before her eyes and she didn't notice. "I've been too busy working," Roxanne said quietly. "This Emerson deal. I spent months preparing documents, negotiating. And it's not your fault. He made a choice." Roxanne walked to the window. The rain had intensified, turning the city into a blur of lights. "You know what the funny thing is? I met him when he was just like this, a young entrepreneur with big ambitions and a small chain of clubs. Came to me for legal advice. I helped him structure the business, attract investors. We worked days and nights." She remembered those first meetings. His enthusiasm, his charisma, his confidence in success. She remembered how gradually the working relationship had grown into something more, how he'd shared dreams of the future with her, how they planned every step of the company's development. And now, history is repeating itself, only I'm on the other side. "What are you going to do?" Roxanne set the empty glass on the table. "For starters, get some sleep. And then tomorrow I'm going to start gathering information about her, about the business, about everything." "Are you going to file for divorce?" "I will, but not right away. First, I want to understand exactly what our dear Ethan has gotten himself into." After talking to Catherine, Roxanne sat in the dark for a long time, looking at the night city. Memories swirled in her head: missed calls, sudden business trips, new security at the club office that wouldn't let her in without an appointment. Strange movements of money in the accounts that Ethan had attributed to business restructuring. She pulled out a notebook and started writing dates, events, names. 20 years of practicing law had taught her one thing: the devil is in the details, and those details always leave a mark. At dawn, Roxanne finally went to bed. Sleep wouldn't come. A plan was forming in her head. She would not act impulsively. She would not make a scene or cause a scandal. She would do what she did best: gather the facts, strategize, and strike when they least expected it. "You've forgotten what I taught you, darling," she whispered into the darkness. "Never underestimate your opponent, especially one who knows all your secrets." Outside the window, the dawn of a new day was dawning. Somewhere in their family home, Ethan was waking up next to his young mistress, confident of his victory. He didn't know yet that the game was just beginning, and the rules of this game would be set by her. After 2 sleepless nights at the Four Seasons Hotel, Roxanne was ready to spring into action. She made her first call to Gerald Finch, a private investigator she had once helped with legal problems. "Jerry, good morning. This is Roxanne Sterling." "Roxanne, haven't heard from you in ages. How are you?" "Need your help. Remember the real estate fraud case when I got you out of that fake ID story?" "Of course I remember. I still feel like I owe you one." "It's time to return the favor. I need to gather information on one person, as much detail as possible, including background, finances, connections." "Who's of interest?" "Meredith Holbrook. Works as a manager at Fitzgerald Elite Fitness." "Give me a couple days. What exactly are we looking for?" "Everything, Jerry. Any inconsistencies, oddities, dark spots in the background. Especially interested in the financial side." While the detective was gathering information, Roxanne decided to do some investigating of her own. She signed up for a trial session at a chain club in Brooklyn. In the locker room, she talked to the receptionist, a young girl named Ashley. "How long have you worked here?" Roxanne asked casually. "Second year. Love our atmosphere, although a lot has been changing lately." "What do you mean?" "Well, Miss Holbrook, for one, came in as a simple trainer, and 6 months later she's already in the head office. Such a rise. A capable girl." Ashley looked around and lowered her voice. "You know, there's been a lot of weird stuff, especially the story with Mrs. Benson, a regular client of ours, an older lady, very wealthy. Meredith became her personal trainer, and then suddenly Mrs. Benson signed some investment documents. A large sum of money disappeared, and Meredith got a promotion." 2 days later, Jerry called. "I have the first results. Real name is Meredith Ann Sutton, originally from Des Moines, Iowa. Father was in jail for petty fraud. Mother worked as a waitress. As a teenager, 3 priors for shoplifting. Changed her last name after 18 and moved to California." "Anything else?" "Worked at several fitness clubs in Los Angeles. Never stayed anywhere for more than a year. There were complaints from customers, but all hushed up. And here's the interesting thing. She's a frequent guest at this underground poker club in Manhattan. Big bets, questionable acquaintances." Roxanne wrote down every word. Keep following her, especially her meetings outside of work. The next step was to meet with the network's former CFO, Michael Ramirez. He had quit 3 months ago under strange circumstances. "Why did you leave, Mr. Ramirez?" The man tapped his fingers nervously on the desk. "Noticed irregularities in the financial records. Strange contracts, membership fee fraud. It was a clever scheme, technically legal, but essentially tax evasion." "Did you report it to management?" "I tried. But after Miss Holbrook came in, a lot of decisions started to be made. Informally. They just stopped listening to me. That evening in her hotel room, Roxanne laid out the materials she'd gathered. The story was beginning to take shape. An ambitious adventurer with a dark past, document schemes, suspicious financial transactions. She pulled out her phone. "Jerry, I need a complete dossier. All bank accounts, all contacts, all places she visits, and most importantly, the pattern of her financial transactions. It's going to be expensive, Roxanne. Money isn't a problem. I have enough personal savings." Leaning back in her chair, Roxanne reviewed the notes. 20 years of working as a corporate lawyer had taught her one thing. A beautiful facade often hid a rotten foundation, and she was going to dig it down to the ground. Taking a pen, she began to map out a plan of action. It was time to familiarize herself with the IRS and other regulatory agencies. In the meantime, let Meredith savor her victory. She has no idea that a storm is brewing. It wasn't hard to find Mrs. Benson. The elderly lady lived in a luxurious mansion on the Upper East Side. Roxanne rang the doorbell, holding a bouquet of Ethan's favorite flowers, white lilies. The door was opened by an elderly housekeeper. "What can I do for you?" "I'd like to speak to Mrs. Benson. Tell her it concerns the Fitzgerald Elite Fitness Club." She was met in the living room, furnished with antique furniture, by an elegant gray-haired woman in her 70s. "Mrs. Benson, I'm Roxanne Sterling, corporate counsel. I'm investigating possible irregularities at the club." "Ah, that club." The woman wrinkled her nose. "Don't remind me of it, especially that. Miss Holbrook, tell me what happened." "It started so innocently. She became my personal trainer, so sweet, so attentive. Always took the time to listen to an old woman, and then she started telling me about this amazing opportunity to invest in expanding the club. Promised 30% interest." "How much did you invest?" $500,000, all of my savings." Mrs. Benson blotted her eyes with a handkerchief. "When I tried to get an accounting of the use of the funds, she started avoiding me. Then she transferred to the main office." After the meeting, Roxanne drove to Brooklyn. Sarah James, the club's former administrator, worked there. They met at a small coffee shop. "I tried to alert management," Sarah twirled her cup nervously. "Noticed oddities in the paperwork. Customers were paying membership dues in cash, but not all the amounts were being held through the official cash register. Meredith attributed it to some new discount system." "Why were you fired?" "Officially for being late. Actually, I was asking too much." Jerry called in the evening. "Got some interesting findings. Your Meredith is a professional rich man hunter. Has been involved with 3 business owners in California in the last 5 years. The stories are all similar: an affair, then problems at the company, mysterious financial losses." "Do you have the paperwork?" "Sent it in the mail. One more thing. She's been seeing a man named Victor Reyes on a regular basis. Checked him out. Professional con man, specializes in document forgery." Roxanne opened her laptop and immersed herself in studying the files. Los Angeles story: affair with a restaurant chain owner, large sum of money missing, business bankruptcy. San Diego: similar scheme with a real estate company. The next day she met Tom Harris, a former accountant for one of the clubs. The scheme was elaborate, he explained. Some of the membership dues were held through a separate account, officially for special promotions and loyalty programs, but the money was disappearing. "How much could have gone through this scheme?" "I estimate about $2 million in the last 6 months." Roxanne methodically gathered documents, account statements, copies of contracts, witness statements. Meredith was using a proven pattern. First she charmed the business owner, then she introduced her innovative methods of work, at the same time withdrawing money through false accounts. "There's more," Jerry reported. "Found a former client from L.A., James Porter, ready to testify about how she bilked him out of $300,000 under the pretense of investing in a fitness program." That evening, Roxanne systematized the materials she had gathered. She now had evidence of at least 3 episodes of fraud, witness statements, and documents of suspicious financial transactions. She pulled out a picture of Meredith from the corporate event, a beautiful, confident woman with a shark smile, typical predator in designer clothes. "You made a major mistake," Roxanne muttered. "Figured you could pull off your scheme in my house." There was enough material to go to the police, but Roxanne realized that would be too easy. No, she wanted more than that. She wanted Meredith and Ethan to realize their game wasn't just lost, it hadn't even begun. Picking up her cell phone, she dialed the number of her old acquaintance from the IRS. "Steve, remember you said you were looking for a big case for your department? I've got something interesting." The plan was beginning to take shape. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment was close at hand. In her hotel room, Roxanne methodically prepared the first strike. Opening the new laptop she'd bought with cash, she created an anonymous email account through a secure server. Every step was well thought out, no trace, no ties to her personally. "Dear customers of the Fitzgerald Elite chain of fitness clubs," she began the letter, "in order to protect your interests, we find it necessary to report serious irregularities in the club's operations." Roxanne attached carefully selected documents to the letter, copies of contracts with signs of forgery, testimony from former employees, a history of membership fee fraud. Special emphasis was placed on Mrs. Benson's case. The story of an elderly woman who had lost her life savings was bound to resonate. By 10 in the morning, 50 of the network's largest clients had received the letter. By noon, chaos had ensued. "What's going on? The whole office is on its ear," reported Catherine, who worked in the building next door to the club. "Customers are calling non-stop, demanding explanations." Roxanne watched the main entrance to the office from the cafe across the street. Meredith showed up around 2, disheveled, without her usual gloss. Ethan hurried after her, a look of panic on his face. "The Anderson family is backing out of their 1-year contract," Catherine wrote again. "Just got a letter from Blue Star's lawyers demanding an independent audit." By late afternoon, the situation had escalated. Meredith called an emergency staff meeting in an attempt to calm the employees, but her assurances of competitor slander sounded unconvincing against the backdrop of concrete documents. "Ethan locked himself in his office," reported Jerry, who was watching the office. "Looks lousy, and your girlfriend's running around between floors trying to keep everyone calm, but she only seems to be making it worse." Roxanne opened the mail. Dozens of letters from worried customers. Some demanded immediate refunds. Others threatened legal action. The lawyers for the 3 large corporations that had employee service contracts were particularly active. By the end of the day, a message came from an anonymous club employee. Meredith threw a tantrum in Ethan's office, screamed that it was a competitor's plot, that they were trying to smear her. It was the first time he wouldn't back her up. That evening, Jerry sent pictures of Meredith leaving the office alone, without Ethan's usual escort, getting into a cab instead of the company car. "First crack," Roxanne noted, satisfied. The next morning, New York Business published an article about possible fraud at a well-known chain of fitness clubs. Ethan's phone was disconnected. Meredith was 2 hours late for work. "They got into an argument," Catherine reported. "Heard him yelling in his office about the setup and the reputational risks. She tried to make excuses, but it looked lame." By the evening of the second day, the company's stock had fallen 15%. 3 major corporate clients announced the suspension of contracts pending clarification. Roxanne watched the unfolding chaos with quiet confidence. The first blow had achieved its goal. The immaculate facade was beginning to crack. Now the next phase had to be prepared. "Jerry, track their movements over the next few days, especially interested in Meredith's meetings outside the office." Already working on it. By the way, she made a large cash withdrawal this morning. Preparing escape routes, Roxanne muttered. Well, let her. It's a start. She opened a new file and began drafting the next letter. Now that the first wave of panic had passed, a more pointed strike was needed, and she had the perfect materials for that. After all, the worst thing that can happen to a con artist is a loss of trust, and trust is notoriously easy to break and nearly impossible to rebuild, especially when the blow comes from within, from someone who knows all the weaknesses. By the end of the week, the situation at Fitzgerald Elite had reached a fever pitch. Clients were canceling contracts en masse, and the company's stock continued to fall. Jerry reported to Roxanne on Meredith and Ethan's every move. They don't visit together anymore, the detective reported. She was late for work again today. She looks exhausted. Panic reigned in the office. Meredith, who had lost her usual gloss, was scurrying between floors trying to keep the situation under control. After lunch, she had a public breakdown. She yelled at a young receptionist right in the lobby. "You're an idiot. I asked you not to connect me with those assholes at Golden Fitness. They're poaching our clients." Ethan locked himself in his office, trying to salvage what could still be salvaged. Calling old partners, meeting with lawyers. That evening, Roxanne spotted him at the hotel bar. He was sitting alone, lost, and aged. "They had an argument right in the office," Catherine wrote. "She demanded more money for crisis PR. He refused. She freaked out and slammed the door." Roxanne methodically continued her work. Anonymous calls to the IRS. Check Fitzgerald Elite's last quarterly returns. Letters to competitors. Your biggest rival is on the verge of collapse. Now is the time to act. In the evening, Jerry sent an audio tape. Another lover's quarrel in Ethan's car. "You promised you had it under control," Ethan shouted. "I'm doing everything I can. This is a conspiracy against us." "Against us or against you? How did they know about Mrs. Benson?" "Are you accusing me? I don't know what to think. The company is falling apart." The next day, Meredith didn't show up at the office. She called, citing a migraine. Ethan spent 3 hours with the auditors trying to explain the discrepancies in the paperwork. "She withdrew another 40 grand in cash," Jerry reported, "and met some murky guy at a cafe on the outskirts." Roxanne smiled. The rats were starting to leave the ship. In the evening, she saw Ethan again in the hotel bar. This time, he wasn't alone. He was trying to calm Meredith down, but the conversation was clearly not going well. "Baby, we can handle it. We can handle it. Have you seen the quotes? The stock's going down. We'll find a way out." "What's the way out? Sell everything before it's too late?" "What are you talking about? This is my life's work." "Exactly. Your life. And what do I get?" Roxanne watched the scene from the far corner of the bar. The once passionate lovers had turned into annoyed partners in misery. Meredith wasn't making eyes at her anymore. Ethan wasn't trying to hug her. By the end of the week, it was revealed that the 3 top trainers had gone to competitors. Clients continued to tear up contracts. Rumors swirled around the office about an impending visit from the IRS. "They don't sleep together anymore," Jerry reported. "She's gone back to her old apartment." Roxanne opened her laptop. It was time for the next strike. She still had trump cards up her sleeve, documents on Meredith's past scams, evidence of her machinations in other cities. "Cute is cute," she muttered as she began typing up a new exposé letter. "Let's see how you handle the next challenge. After all, there's nothing worse for a relationship than shared problems, especially when one partner begins to suspect the other of betrayal. And Roxanne knew for a fact, suspicion eats away at love faster than any poison. "Sterling Company," read the new sign on the office door in downtown Manhattan. Roxanne meticulously looked around the room, the perfect place for the next phase of the operation. The company, registered under a shell company, was to be the vehicle for buying up Fitzgerald Elite stock. The paperwork is ready, her old acquaintance, corporate lawyer Alan Prescott, informed her. The company's clean, no ties to you. You can start work. Roxanne's first appointment was with Michael Donovan, owner of the largest competing chain of fitness clubs. Mr. Donovan, let's be blunt. Roxanne placed a file folder in front of him. Fitzgerald is on the verge of collapse. Its stock is plummeting. Clients are leaving. Now is the perfect time for a takeover. Why are you interested? Donovan scrutinized the papers. My company represents a group of investors. We're willing to buy up shares, but we need a strong operating partner. After 2 hours of negotiation, they struck hands. Donovan would provide management expertise. Sterling companies would handle the stock buying. The next 2 weeks became a whirlwind of meetings and negotiations. Roxanne methodically met with minority shareholders, offering to buy out their shares at an above-market price. Demand for shares is increasing, the stockbroker reported. Someone is clearly preparing a hostile takeover. Panic reigned in the Fitzgerald Elite office. Ethan called an emergency board meeting. Meredith, who had lost her former confidence, demanded decisive action. We need to rewrite the assets immediately. Her voice rang with tension. Before it's too late. What are you talking about? Ethan asked tiredly. Sign over some of the stock to me. I can help save the business. Are you out of your mind? Now is not the time. When, if not now? I'm risking everything for you. Roxanne got a recording of this conversation from Jerry and smiled contentedly. Meredith was beginning to panic, showing her true colors. Meanwhile, the Sterling companies continued to act. Anonymous sources were leaking information to the press about problems at the clubs. Journalists wrote about customer dissatisfaction, about mass layoffs of staff, about possible financial fraud. Shares are down another 20%, the broker reported. Large stakeholders are starting to get rid of the securities. Roxanne methodically bought up everything that appeared on the market, through shell companies, through third parties, offshore. By the end of the month, she had almost 30% of the stock under her control. Friday night, Jerry called. Meredith is hysterical. She's demanding Ethan sign over the real estate and part of the business to her. Threatens to go to a competitor. Did you get that? Sure. The quality is excellent. Roxanne turned on the tape. Meredith's voice sounded shrill. You promised we'd be partners, that everything would be fair. Now is not the time. When is the time? When is it going to collapse? I'm not going down with you. What are you talking about? About thinking about the future. Rewrite your assets before it's too late. Ethan was silent. From the sounds of it, he was pouring himself a drink. You've changed, he finally uttered. Where did that girl who talked about love go? And you? Where's the man who promised me the whole world? Roxanne turned off the tape. The plan was working perfectly. The fear of losing her business was forcing Meredith to show her true colors. And Ethan was starting to have an epiphany. On Monday, Sterling Company announced that it had acquired a large stake in Fitzgerald Elite. The news sparked a new wave of panic in the market. We are prepared to engage in a constructive dialogue with management, a Sterling Company spokeswoman told reporters. But we believe a full audit and management change is necessary. In the evening, Jerry sent new photos. Meredith leaving the bank with a bulky bag, getting into a cab. More shots of her meeting some man at a coffee shop, handing him an envelope. The rats are jumping ship, Roxanne muttered, looking at the photos. The next day, she scheduled another meeting with Donovan. It's time to move on to the final phase, she said, holding out a folder of documents to him. We control enough shares to call a special meeting of shareholders. Are you sure the time is right? More than. Especially with this. She placed a thumb drive on the table with Meredith's recorded conversations. Roxanne leaned back in her chair, looking out over Manhattan at night. The invisible hand of the market. How ironic. Ethan had always believed in the free market, in fair competition. Well, let him experience the benefits of that freedom. And Meredith is digging her own hole, demanding a share in a failing business. It's only a matter of time before she drives Ethan away with her greed. "Get the paperwork ready for the shareholders' meeting," she told Alan. "It's time to show our strength." The game was entering its final stages, and Roxanne knew exactly who would emerge victorious. Roxanne had spent a sleepless night preparing the papers for publication. Each paper was carefully selected: bank statements, contracts with signs of forgery, letters from disgruntled clients. She created an anonymous account on a popular business forum. "Here comes your finest hour, darling," she murmured as she uploaded the first batch of documents. The membership fee fraud was particularly impressive. Double bookkeeping, unrecorded cash payments, fictitious refunds. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the materials appeared on the web. By 10, they were picked up by the first business bloggers. By noon, a veritable storm had broken out. "We're having a meltdown," Catherine wrote. "Ethan's been on a tear. He's demanding to find out who leaked the documents." The main office was in chaos. Employees were gathered in groups, whispering in corners. No one was working. Everyone was discussing the leak and its implications. "These documents, are they real?" The young accountant nervously fiddled with the edge of her blouse. "Looks like it. I've always suspected something was amiss with the accounting. They say the IRS is on its way." Meredith paced between floors, trying to reassure the staff, but her assurances sounded unconvincing, especially against the backdrop of concrete numbers and facts. "Everything is under control. This is a competitor provocation." Her voice trailed off into a squeal. Ethan locked himself in the office with the lawyers. An hour later, the auditors joined them. Another hour later, a representative from the IRS arrived. "Meredith is freaking out," Jerry reported. "Tried to get in to see Ethan, but he wouldn't take her in. Yelled at the receptionist." By late afternoon, the situation had escalated to a fever pitch. The business press was abuzz with discussion of the scandal. The stock plummeted another 30%. Where did this information come from? Ethan hovered over the CFO's desk. Who would have access to the internal documents? Yeah, I don't know. Several people had access. Who exactly? You, Meredith. Accounting. Roxanne received a recording of this conversation and nodded satisfied. The seed of suspicion had been planted. The next day, she contacted a reporter from the Wall Street Journal anonymously. "I have additional information about the situation at Fitzgerald Elite. Of particular interest are the operations of the last 6 months." The article was crushing. The journalist linked the fraud to the arrival of a new top manager, a young, ambitious woman with a questionable past. "What did you tell them?" Ethan stormed into Meredith's office. "Why is everything pointing at you?" "I didn't do anything. It's a conspiracy. I'm being set up." "By who? Who benefits?" Roxanne listened to the tape of their argument and smiled. The plan was working perfectly. Suspicion, distrust, fear of exposure, emotions destroyed relationships more effectively than any documents. By the end of the week, 3 top managers had resigned. Clients canceled contracts en masse. Suppliers were demanding payment in advance. "Meredith took a large withdrawal from the account," Jerry reported. "Looks like she's preparing an escape route." "Let her," Roxanne replied. "She's going to need that money soon." She opened her laptop and began preparing a new batch of documents. This time, evidence of Meredith's past scams in other cities. A paper trail. It's what always ruins the most cunning crooks, especially when the paperwork falls into the right hands. And Roxanne had very capable hands. And a very long memory. At 9 a.m. Monday morning, 4 tax inspectors entered the Fitzgerald Elite office. No warning, no chance to prepare. Chief Accountant Martha Simmons nearly fainted when she saw their IDs. "Scheduled audit," the chief inspector announced dryly. "We'll need all financial records for the last year." Panic broke out in the accounting department. Junior staff frantically sorted through folders, trying to put things in some sort of order. Martha locked herself in her office, frantically going through reports. "I need an explanation." Her hands shook as she dialed Meredith's number. "What to do about those special accounts?" "Don't say anything. Just keep quiet," Meredith cut her off. "I'll handle it." Ethan paced around the office, trying to make sense of what was happening. For 20 years he'd been building this business. Every contract, every club, every little detail all had been thought out and calibrated. How could he let it all fall apart? "Sir, the inspectors found discrepancies in the cash reports." The secretary peered into the office. "They want to talk to you." He nodded, feeling cold sweat trickle down his back. Scraps of conversations with Meredith about the new accounting system, about special programs for clients, were running through his head. Why hadn't he checked everything personally then? Meanwhile, Meredith was actively covering her tracks. She called a courier and sent some files to an unknown destination. Then she had a long conversation on the phone with someone calling him a computer security specialist. "Delete everything. Do you understand? All traces of it. So no one can recover." By evening, the inspectors had discovered the first serious violations. Unreported cash, nearly $300,000 in the last 3 months. Fictitious refunds of membership dues. Forged signatures on contracts. "Mr. Fitzgerald, do you understand the gravity of the situation?" The chief inspector tapped his pen on the desk. "These are no longer just reporting errors." Ethan nodded silently. One thought pulsed in his head. How could he be so blind? Meredith. He'd trusted her with everything. Let her manage the finances. Gave away the old employees who tried to warn him. "They're questioning everyone one by one," Catherine reported. "Martha's been sitting with the inspectors for 2 hours now. They say she told them all about Meredith's special program." Meredith locked herself in her office with her laptop. A couple hours later, there was no trace of her former confidence. Disheveled, with smeared mascara, she was trying to call some people. "You have to help. I'll pay double." By the end of the week, the first results of the audit came in. A $2 million fine, and that was just the beginning. The inspectors promised to return with a more detailed inspection. "This is your fault," yelled Ethan into the phone. "You promised everything was legal." "Me? You signed all the paperwork." "Because I believed you." Roxanne listened to the tape in her hotel room. Everything was going according to plan. Fear of exposure, mutual recriminations, panic. The perfect recipe for relationship destruction. She opened her laptop and began preparing her next strike. After all, the tax audit was just the beginning. She still had more trumps up her sleeve. For now, let them destroy each other on their own. Fear and paranoia were the best aids in her revenge plan. Roxanne was reviewing another of Jerry's reports in her hotel room. The storm she had created was gaining strength, destroying not only the business but also the lovers' relationship. "Major scandal at the office," the detective wrote. Meredith demanded an immediate rewrite of some of the assets to her. Ethan refused. She threw a tantrum. The message was accompanied by an audio recording. "You promised we were partners." Meredith's voice trailed off into a squeal. "That everything would be equal. Now is not the time." "When is the time? When everything is taken away? I risked it for you. I put myself on the line, and now you're abandoning me?" "No one's abandoning you, but demanding stock in the middle of a crisis. Now is the time to do it, before it's too late. Or do you think I don't know about your secret accounts? About offshore?" Roxanne smiled. Meredith acted predictably. Cornered, she'd start making threats. Typical con artist behavior: first charm, then blackmail. The next report came in the evening. Ethan got drunk in the hotel bar, tried to call his old partners. No one wanted to talk to him. The reputational risks were too high. "You've changed," he told Meredith the next day. "Where did that sweet girl who talked about love go? And you? Where's that successful businessman who promised me the world? Now you're just a loser with debt." Roxanne listened to their bickering with cold satisfaction. Every quarrel, every angry word shattered the perfect picture they had created. The reality turned out to be ugly: a corrupt woman and a man blind with passion. "I'll tell everything," Meredith shouted. "About all your shenanigans, your tax evasion, about bribing officials. Are you crazy? These are your schemes. Prove it. I have documents with your signature on them." Roxanne methodically recorded every threat, every confession. It would all come in handy later, when it was time to deliver the final blow. Ethan started drinking. He spent every evening in the hotel bar, staring into the void and ordering whiskeys one after another. Sometimes Meredith would join him. They'd argue about something. Then she'd leave in tears. "He's broken," Catherine wrote. "Missed an important investor meeting today. Sat in his office with a bottle." Roxanne remembered a different Ethan, confident, ambitious, full of plans. The man who'd built a successful business from scratch, who had once won her over with his energy and charisma. Now she watched him turn into a pathetic shadow of himself, and felt a strange feeling, not gloating, no, rather satisfaction that justice would be done. "He's beginning to see things," she wrote in her journal. "Sees the true face of his beloved. Too bad it's too late." Meredith was changing too. Gone was the gloss of the successful businesswoman, the mask of the caring lover. Her real face was revealed: greedy, calculating, willing to do anything for money. "Either you sign over the assets to me, or I go to the police." Her final ultimatum sounded in the empty office late at night. "You're not going to do that. You're an accessory after the fact. You think? I have proof I acted at your behest, under duress, intimidated." Roxanne listened to the tape several times. Every word, every intonation said one thing: the rats were starting to gnaw at each other. "It's funny," she thought, looking out at the city at night. "They don't even realize that their relationship was doomed from the start. Passion built on betrayal always ends in betrayal." The next day, Jerry reported, Meredith had withdrawn a large sum from her account and was meeting with some lawyer, preparing ways to back out. Let her, Roxanne thought. She's going to need that money soon, and a good lawyer too. She opened her laptop and began preparing new documents. The story was coming to a climax, and she wanted the ending to be particularly spectacular. After all, revenge was a dish served cold, and she'd spent enough time letting it cool to just the right temperature. "I wonder," she pondered, "if Ethan realizes that things could have been different, that it wasn't so much his passion for the young woman that ruined him, but his own blindness and greed." But it didn't matter anymore. The mechanism had been started, and neither passion nor money nor threats could stop it. And Roxanne just watched the house of cards they had built on lies and betrayal crumble. In the end, justice always prevails. Sometimes she just needs a little help. The meeting with Jerry at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town started out of the blue. "Remember when you asked me to look into all of Meredith's connections?" The detective placed a thick folder on the table. "We found something interesting, very interesting." Roxanne opened the folder and froze. In the photos from 2 years ago, Meredith looked different, simpler dressed, no makeup, with a baby in her arms. There was a man standing next to her, tall, blonde, in work clothes. "Who's that?" "Brian Sutton, her legal husband. Lives in Portland with their 5-year-old son Jake. Works as a construction worker." Why is this information only coming out now? Jerry sipped his coffee. She's been covering her tracks well, changed her name, used fake IDs. But the main thing is, we were looking in the wrong place. We were checking California when we should have been digging in Oregon. Roxanne scrutinized the documents. A marriage certificate dated 6 years earlier, a child's birth certificate, joint tax returns. She's not divorced. Officially, no. What's more, she flies to Portland once a month. Last time she was there was a week ago. Roxanne leaned back in her chair, comprehending the information. The picture was getting more and more interesting. "Contact your husband," she finally said. "Just be careful. We need to figure out what he knows." For the next 3 days, Jerry kept surveillance in Portland. Meredith did show up there, parked the rental car outside a modest house on the outskirts of town. "She's spending the weekend with them," the detective reported. "Plays with her son, cooks dinner, just like a normal wife and mother." "And the husband?" "Doesn't seem to know about her second life. Thinks she works as a counselor and travels a lot for business." Roxanne began to put the puzzle together. Meredith was playing a double game. In New York, she's a successful businesswoman, the mistress of a wealthy man. In Portland, she's a simple construction worker's wife, a caring mother. How does she explain the origin of the money? Tells her husband she makes good money in counseling. He doesn't seem to care much, glad he can spend more time with his son. Roxanne decided to take action. She called Brian Sutton, identifying herself as an IRS employee. "Mr. Sutton, we're conducting an audit of your wife's activities. Meredith, is there something wrong with her taxes? Tell me, are you aware of exactly what your wife is doing in New York?" A pause. "She's a consultant, helps companies grow their businesses. Do you know a company called Fitzgerald Elite?" "No. Should you?" Roxanne methodically gathered information. Meredith's story was even more cynical than it first appeared. She wasn't just a con artist. She was a skillful manipulator who had created 2 parallel lives. In New York, she never wore a wedding ring. All her belongings in Ethan's apartment are carefully selected, nothing personal, nothing that might give away the existence of another life. "She's seeing some woman," Jerry reported. "Looks like a private accountant. Handed her some paperwork. Keep track. I need to know where the money goes." The investigation revealed Meredith had created a complex scheme. Some of the money from the club scams went into offshore accounts. The other part was being funneled through shell companies to an account in Portland as a consultant's salary. "Prepare to strike," Roxanne told the detective. "We need hard evidence, photos, documents, tapes of conversations." She imagined Ethan's reaction when he learned the truth. Finding out that the woman he'd ruined his marriage and risked his business for was leading a double life. "Just take your time," she warned Jerry. "Let them have a final showdown first. Let her start claiming her share of the assets. And then—" The plan was simple and elegant. First, an anonymous letter to Ethan with pictures of the family idol in Portland. Then, a leak to the press. And finally, a visit from an angry husband to the Fitzgerald Elite office. "Are you sure he's coming?" Jerry asked. "He'll come, especially when he finds out where his savings have gone. And that his wife isn't just a consultant, but a con artist who stole millions." Roxanne opened her laptop and began compiling a dossier. Meredith's story needed to be presented in all its glory, with documents, photos, eyewitness accounts. Funny, she thought. Meredith has worked so hard to create the image of a successful businesswoman that she's forgotten the simple truth. Every lie comes true one day. All that remained was to choose the moment to strike. And that moment was approaching. Meredith was getting more and more nervous, demanding guarantees from Ethan, threatening to expose her. Let her, Roxanne decided. Let her think she has the situation under control. It will make her downfall all the more spectacular. After all, The best revenge is when your enemies destroy themselves. All she had to do was nudge the pendulum slightly in the right direction. Fitzgerald Elite's annual fundraiser was supposed to be an attempt to salvage the company's reputation. Ethan was personally calling important clients, urging them to attend. Meredith fussed with the organization, choosing flowers and menus. Roxanne watched the preparations through her informants. She knew the house of cards would collapse tonight. The hall of the Ritz-Carlton shone with crystal chandeliers. Waiters were serving champagne. Ethan, pale and gaunt but still trying to keep up appearances, greeted the guests. His right hand trembled, giving away his nervous tension. Meredith was resplendent in a Versace gown. Only a very keen observer would have noticed her nervously rubbing her pearl necklace, her habit in moments of stress. "He's here," Jerry whispered into the phone. "Just checked in." Brian Sutton, dressed in a single weekend suit, looked out of place among the glossy businessmen, but his presence was part of Roxanne's plan. "Is that her?" His voice boomed across the room during Meredith's small talk with the investors. "Meredith, or should I call you Miss Holbrook?" Meredith stiffened before reaching her glass to her lips. Her face went white, her fingers convulsively clenched on the crystal stem. "Brian, what are you doing here?" "Came to see your second life. Jake says hi, by the way. Asked when Mom would be back." Silence hung in the hall. Ethan slowly turned to Meredith. "What's he talking about?" "Don't listen to him. He's crazy. I don't know this man." "You don't?" Brian pulled out his cell phone. "Who's this then? With our son in his arms?" The pictures on the screen were clear. A family picnic, Christmas, the baby's birthday. Meredith, happy and at home, not at all like a glamorous businesswoman. "I can explain." Her voice trembled. "Really?" Ethan grabbed Brian's cell phone. "Explain. Explain why you lied, why you hid that you were married, that you had a child." The glass fell out of Meredith's hands, shattering on the marble floor. The shards shattered like shards of her carefully constructed lies. "You don't understand. I did it for us, for Jake's sake. I needed the money." "Money?" Brian grinned bitterly. "The same ones you stole from my savings? Or the ones you took out of the clubs?" The guests began to whisper. Someone was filming what was happening on their phone. Meredith's eyes darted around, looking for support, but met only judgment and curiosity. "Ethan, please, I'll explain everything. In private." "In private?" he recoiled. "How do you explain 6 years of marriage, the baby, or the fact that you've been running the same scams in other cities?" Her knees buckled. She sank into a chair, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "I loved you. Really loved. Like you loved me?" Brian stepped closer. "Or those businessmen in California." Ethan went white. "What?" "Oh, you didn't know. It's her signature trick to seduce a business owner, gain his trust, and then rip him off for good." Meredith jumped up, trying to run to the exit, but the guards blocked the way. 2 men in strict suits appeared in the hall. "Meredith Ann Sutton, NYPD. You're under arrest on suspicion of fraud." She settled to the floor, shaking with sobs. Her expensive dress crumpled, her makeup spread, turning the gaudy beauty into a pitiful sight. Ethan stood there, devastated, staring at the woman to whom he'd given everything: love, trust, business. His fingers automatically loosened his tie as if it were strangling him. "I demand compensation." Brian's voice sounded firm. "All the money she stole. Every dime of it." The guests left the room in a hurry. Tomorrow, all the newspapers would be full of headlines about the scandal. The Fitzgerald elite's reputation was ruined for good. Roxanne watched the denouement through the security cameras in her hotel room. She watched the life of the woman who stole her husband crumble, saw Ethan realize the depth of his fall. "Shall I call you a cab, Mr. Fitzgerald?" the maitre d' asked. Ethan shook his head. He strode toward the bar, hunched over and aged 10 years in one evening. Meredith was led away in handcuffs. Her last words were drowned out in sobs. "I just wanted a better life." Brian was left standing in the middle of the empty hall, clutching pictures of his family, a family that now existed only on paper. Roxanne closed the laptop. The deed was done. The house of cards had collapsed, burying all its occupants under the rubble. After all, every lie has an expiration date, and when it expires, the truth bursts into life, sweeping away all illusions. After her arrest, Meredith was taken to the police station. The procedure was standard: processing, fingerprinting, a temporary cell until the morning when the first remand hearing was to take place. "You have the right to make one call," the officer on duty informed her. Meredith dialed an unknown number, speaking quietly for only a minute. 2 hours later, a lawyer arrived at the station, a burly man in an expensive suit. "My client is ready to post bail." By morning, Meredith was gone. Security cameras caught her getting into a black SUV with tinted windows. The license plates turned out to be fake. Ethan learned of her escape when he arrived at their shared apartment. The safe had been opened and valuables were gone: a watch collection, jewelry, cash. On the table was a note: "I'm sorry. It's best for everyone." She took everything. His voice sounded lifeless in the phone call with his lawyer. Even the paperwork for the offshore accounts. Roxanne was getting information from her sources. Ethan was flitting between banks trying to salvage what was left of the business. Creditors were demanding repayment. Investors were filing lawsuits. "Mr. Fitzgerald, your accounts have been seized," a bank clerk reported dryly. "Criminal investigation." Detectives were interviewing club employees. New details of the machinations were being uncovered: forged contracts, fictitious suppliers, illegal bank transactions. "She's thought of everything," the investigator said. "Prepared escape routes in advance. Documents, money, fake passports." Roxanne methodically prepared the final blow. The shareholders' meeting was scheduled for a week from today. She had a controlling interest and proof of all the machinations. A call from Ethan caught her in the evening. "Roxy, I know you're the one behind everything." "What makes you think that?" "Who else could have calculated everything so perfectly, destroy me so methodically?" "You destroyed yourself, Ethan. I just helped the truth come out." The police had put Meredith on an international manhunt, but they both knew finding her wouldn't be easy. She'd been preparing to escape for a long time, turning her disappearance into an art form, and Ethan was left alone, with a ruined business, debts, and shards of his life. A man who lost everything because of his passion for a woman who turned out to be a professional con artist. Roxanne stared out the window of her hotel at the city at night. Revenge had been accomplished. All that was left to do was to put the final touches on it. The meeting was scheduled in the conference room of Roxanne's law firm. Ethan was 10 minutes late, unusual for a man who had always been known for his punctuality. He looked aged, his suit hanging baggy on his slimmer figure. "Have a seat," Roxanne pointed to a chair. A stack of papers lay in front of her. "Did you plan everything from the beginning?" He sank heavily into the chair. "No. At first I just wanted to figure out what was going on. The plan came later, when I saw the magnitude of the problem." Ethan ran a hand over his face. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" "Yes, but you weren't the only one. Meredith turned out to be a professional con artist. She's pulled schemes like this before." Roxanne opened the first folder. "Here are the terms of the divorce. I keep the house in Westchester and the summer cottage. You get an apartment in Manhattan." "Fair enough. Now for the business. Sterling Company, which bought up a controlling interest, is my company." Ethan nodded. "I guess that. Only you could pull off that operation so cleanly." "I have a plan to save the network, but there are conditions." She laid out the documents: restructuring schemes, debt repayment plans, a new marketing strategy. You'll remain president emeritus, but actual management will fall to me. All financial decisions are through the board of directors only. And my debts? The company will assume them on the condition that you transfer your remaining equity stake to me. Ethan studied the papers. His hands trembled slightly. Roxy, I have to say, don't. I don't want to hear an apology. No, listen, I was an idiot, a blind, narcissistic idiot, letting a beautiful con artist ruin everything we'd spent years building. Roxanne was silent, letting him finish. You know what the worst part is? I really believed I loved her, and she was just playing her part. Just like with all the previous victims. Ethan picked up a pen, started to sign the documents. On the last page, his hand froze. You're saving what I was trying to destroy. Why? Because this business is my brainchild too. I helped you build it, remember? By late afternoon, all the paperwork was signed. Roxanne had already drawn up a plan of action, a new management team, an audit of all the club's upgrades to programs and equipment. Now what? Ethan asked, standing at the door. Now you take a vacation, a long vacation, and when you come back, you're going to work under new rules. He nodded and walked out. Roxanne was left alone in the conference room, looking out at the night city outside the window. The circle had closed. She had regained not only control of the business, but also her sense of justice. Revenge was accomplished, but it brought no joy. Only the realization that sometimes you have to tear everything down to the ground to build anew. And this time, she would build it right. Spring in New York was unusually warm. Roxanne stood at the panoramic window of her new office on the 42nd floor, watching the city wake up in the rays of the rising sun. Exactly 1 year had passed since the events that had turned her life upside down. Fitzgerald Elite was now called Sterling Fitness Elite. The rebranding became a symbol of renewal, new programs, state-of-the-art equipment, carefully selected staff. The company's stock grew steadily, and the client list was filled with big names. Mrs. Sterling, your presentation is in an hour, the receptionist reminded her. Roxanne smiled. Today she was presenting to investors on her development plan for the next year, opening premium wellness centers, launching her own line of sports nutrition, expanding into other states. The morning mail brought news about Ethan. He was now working as a regional manager for a small chain of fitness clubs in Seattle. They said he'd started a new life, quit drinking, working hard, trying to rebuild his reputation. Turn on the news, Roxanne asked. A familiar face flashed on the screen. Meredith Sutton, formerly Holbrook, was being led out of a courthouse in Los Angeles in handcuffs. She'd been caught in Hawaii, where she'd fled with some of the stolen money. She now faced 15 years in prison for a series of financial frauds in 3 states. Brian Sutton got full custody of his son, reported Jerry, with whom they maintained a friendly relationship. The boy is seeing a psychologist, but the doctors say he'll do fine. Roxanne walked over to the small bar in the corner of the office and poured a water. She hadn't had alcohol in 6 months, not since Michael Donovan had come into her life. Their acquaintance began with business negotiations. His company was helping to restructure the business. Gradually, working meetings turned into personal ones. Michael turned out to be the complete opposite of Ethan, calm, judicious, with a subtle sense of humor. "Don't you regret it?" he asked one evening. "About what?" "About the way things turned out. About revenge," Roxanne wondered. Revenge had indeed been accomplished, but was it satisfying? "You know, I realized one thing," she answered then. "Revenge isn't about punishment. It's about restoring balance. I didn't just ruin their lives. I built something new on the ruins." Now, looking out at the morning Manhattan skyline, she remembered that conversation. The company was thriving, creating new jobs. Customers were getting quality services. Employees were getting decent pay and growth prospects. Her phone vibrated. A message from Michael. "Good luck with the presentation. Dinner tonight?" Roxanne smiled. Life went on, and there was room for more than just work. "Mrs. Sterling, the investors have arrived," the receptionist reported. Roxanne adjusted her pearl earrings, new ones, bought with the first profits of the renewed company. The old ones, donated by Ethan, she had given to a charity auction. Waiting for her in the conference room were serious men and women ready to invest in her vision for the future. They believed in her, not as Ethan Fitzgerald's ex-wife, but as a strong leader and successful entrepreneur. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," her voice sounded confident. "Today I'm going to tell you about the new stage of our company's development." The presentation went brilliantly. Investors applauded, offered to increase funding. Roxana accepted congratulations, but her thoughts were already in the future. New projects, new goals, new horizons. In the evening, sitting in a restaurant with Michael, she watched the lights of the city. "What are we drinking to?" he asked, raising his mineral water glass. "To the new order. Here's to the fact that sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself." He smiled understandingly. Michael never asked about the past, but he knew how to appreciate the present. And Roxanne finally felt truly free. Free of resentment, free of revenge, free of past illusions. After all, the best revenge isn't just destroying someone else's happiness. The best revenge is to build your own, more lasting and real. And that's what she did.